Hello everybody, welcome back to From Rhythm to Algorithm. We continue on with our derivation, looking to complete our axiom sensorality. Why do we censor things? We have senses. We've gone through the linguistics a bunch, and I wanted to start with some seemingly simple questions today, just to conceptually renormalize, right? Language is literal, and it directly emerges from the movement of objects. So we're just going to ask some simple questions, then we'll get to the theorems that I derived, and again, trying to pull all of these concepts and all of these ideas into one single video and close and complete this proof. And so, do things exist? My obvious question, and yes. People say, oh, philosophy, no. But like, there has to be, a logical basis, just, a non-negotiable for physics, so to speak, if you do business at all, right? Things exist. And those things move. Well, again, can things move, right? How far, I guess even, do things move? Again, yes, but what comes first, motion or distance, right? Because movement is displacement over time, right? So you have to have the concept of distance before you can move. And that's where it came from. We have energy, stabilizes into mass. We all existed in 3 dimensions. All physical systems have a stabilized component of 2, up, down, left, right, good, bad. All of that dichotomy is immediately present. And then we live in 3 dimensions, and that is open. And so distance, right, is, like, what exactly is the distance from my cell phone to my notebook, right? My cell phone's made of atoms, this notebook's made of atoms. They're bonded, that's why they're discrete, right? This thing is independent. If I touch my phone, it feels the force, not this notebook, but it's all connected through each other. And so, but point being is we have discrete objects. And so, but they're 3-dimensionals, right? The atoms, the electrons swirling around in my phone, and this electron swirling around in the notebook are not point particles, right? And all of them have internal dynamic, but point being is that's where you get the concept of dynamic. Everything is dynamic. And so there is some distance between these two things, and then you get the question, does movement exist, right? Am I moving right now? And then the correct thing you should ask is, in relation to what? And right, is there an absolute, so to speak? I don't like the word absolute, but again, we're trying to derive all this stuff immediately. Is there intuitively what's recognized as an absolute reference frame? And yes, as an immediate consequence of we live in 3 dimensions, right? I'm not moving in relation to the table, but I am though, right? Because all of those, you have to pick a specific molecule, which you can't do because of this irreducibility of physical mass. And so you do have, you have an assumption or an error bound, that infinitesimality physically. Again, the distance, if you took a unit's cube in a radius of 1, whatever, that bit of physical space you couldn't measure, that's infinitesimality. But then you have some assumed limit, right? I don't know what I think that's what physics present day calls it, renormalization. Just this acts as a point particle given enough distance. The galaxies act as point particles given enough distance. And so you have to have some sort of assumption. There's always there's internal error for all measurements is what I'm getting at. And so you do have movement, things are discrete, but to actually pinpoint and measure those specifically, it's impossible to do. Because if you take a snapshot or you take a moment, everything is dynamic. It's not actually, it's a reduction of the physical reality you live in. And so things exist and things can move. And you do have what it conceptually is recognized as an absolute reference frame because you live in 3 dimensions. I'm not moving in relation to my phone or to the notebook or to the floor, but I'm on Earth, and Earth is moving in relation to the sun. And so you always have this, right, wherever 2 or more are gathered, you can verify measurements. And so that the consequence of living in 3 dimensions, you have the concept, or you have movement. And so seemingly obvious, direct questions, but just to acknowledge all of those things. And now the big thing that we've now proven from derivation, which is way more poignant than just proof in and of itself, is that the universe, right, in, the 1400s, 1500s, Johannes Kepler with Tycho Brahe or whatever, is they're all sitting there trying to stuff these orbits to make sense of, I think it was either just all of the solar system or the retrograde of Mercury or something. Regardless, he just says, hey guys, the orbits are ellipses and they're not spherical. So you have these big complications in mathematics, and he's like, hey, again, the inanimate objects are not trying to confuse anybody. And so he renormalized, that's how I use the word, just a direct empirical evident, something that's empirically evident. It's like, hey, we can model the planetary motion with ellipses. And so that's what we've now proven with quote unquote dark energy, right? The physical assumption is that things are expanding. They're not, right? It's very, the universe, so to speak, is settling down. And so, right, and that's a physical reality because of thermodynamics. As things cool down, the vibration, again, remember that vibration defining the range, producing temperature. As you get colder, you vibrate less and less and less. And so things are contracting, and that's already present in astrophysics ontology, where you have that dichotomy of the distance between two objects getting larger from expansion or from contraction. We've proven, we've derived that it's contraction. Because to increase efficiency, you occupy less space and you take less steps to accomplish any function. And so contraction, that is exactly what happened in 1500s, these big complicated things, because then again, they introduced dark energy to say this accounts for the expansion of the universe. The fundamental conceptualization in physical reality is things are contracting, not expanding. And so that's a proof. I mean, that's done. That's like the biggest kind of thing. But we've derived, again, movement exists, and it's because of thermodynamics. Things are getting colder, it's becoming more efficient, right? Another physical definition of efficiency. You occupy less space by having less vibration. Yeah. So that was the big conceptualization thing. And then we get to back into the derivation we were doing, but that's a physical renormalization, right? Talking about the actual molecules in this notebook and the molecules in here. They are somewhere, but to actually define that is relative. But that relativity is contained within normalization of just saying, this has some mass, and at a certain distance, it acts like a point particle. And so, moving on, how does uniqueness relate to reducibility? And because reducibility is the mathematical representation of that physical contraction, right? If you reduce, you're contracting. And so, all right, if I lose a limb, my arm or something, I'm still me. So everything is infinitely unique. Everything is special. And so that's the relationship. And we see again another just kind of back to just odds and ends. We see this iteration limit also in computer technology or computer science, the conversion of byte to bit. And I don't even really know what it's accomplishing, because I haven't really done much engineering or computer science specifically. But all computer logic is derivative from logic, which is like drop down menu. Like if you go read a computer programming book, it's very literally like reading a psychology book to me, where it's like everything is common sense, like literally. But this conversion of a byte to a bit after 8, right? Again, that's that iteration after 7, from 7 to 8, the dynamic limit starts over. Just another bit of physical evidence, because again, a computer is a physical processing machine. But everything is a physical thing. But literacy iterates, and we can see that is a natural definition, right? Literate, iterate. Iterality sensorates. Sensorality is iterality. Sensorality is terality. Terrain is landscape. Terrain, rain. What is the relationship of sentience and environment? I put it on one of the other episodes because it was intuitively, again, I can feel, obviously I can feel my own intuition, but it's, again, that these things are true outside of just me. But I think intuitively, when people say environment, they mean sentience, right? You're divine, I've expressed something to the effect of, right, your universe is the things and the people you interact with, right? The person, I don't know, the coffee farmer in Bangladesh. I don't even know if they farm coffee in Bangladesh, but assuming they do, right? That person's not in my universe. It's vivacious, lucid person, thinking, acting, but it's just not someone I've interacted with. And so just conceptually, when people say the word environment, that's really equivalent to sentience. And so getting to a short that I made yesterday, what is legibility to literacy, right? Legibility is literally readability. And so literacy is the ability to read, or so again, from this infinite uniqueness, right? All of these, we're trying to make a definition that's more specific, again, with our sufficiently contained knowledge. Things are mostly described well. We have all the words to describe them. We just need to show this connection between the words. And so we need to, right, literacy, the ability to read and write. Again, that's that dichotomy forcing, but we need to separate, we need to contract or something. We need to pair up our definitions with uniqueness. And so literacy is the ability to write, W-R-I-T-E. And so we were doing all that derivation around what, right, the opposite of left versus I have a constitutional right, which I clearly don't because they're still violated. But literacy is the ability to write, to read or to be read, right? Literacy, the ability to write. Legibility is readability, the ability to be read. And so that's a very clear form of it is what it is. And it shows you again, these to read or to be read. If you just saw that just typed out like just the letters, you would read it correctly. And so that's a emergent from chronology, but we derived that, and that was something important. And yeah. But what is the relationship of reading and writing? Right? Reading is censoring, right? Literally, when you're looking at the shapes of letters, you're saying, what sound does this indicate? What word is that relates to a concept that I've interacted with in the physical world? Right? You're censoring. Reading is censoring, spelled with an S. Reading filters. Sensorality is the capacity to learn. What is the relationship of capacity and ability? Capacity is volume. Ability is function. Functioning works. Spelling a word constructs a variable, and context clues define it. Sensorality clues. So that is where we're at with our derivation today. Again, trying to contract it all and put it into one video, but that's just how the derivation works. Again, we're reducing and then we're building back up, we're contracting and expanding, but there's this stability in this past forms of words that are definite. So solving sensorality with a C gives us sensorality with an S, and it reduces all of the linguistics. Making serious progress, as always. My rights continue to be violated. It is profound and extensive stress. It is completely illegal. And again, as much intuition as whoever's watching this is feeling right now, guess what? I've already done all of these steps. Like this is a performance, and it's like one of those weird things where it's like if people were sitting around wondering if anyone could play the guitar, and then you went to a concert, and then someone is just ripping a symphony, and you're like, well, I didn't even know they played symphonies on guitar. You're like so past, like, can somebody play the guitar? And you're lost in this, and then they miss one note, and you're like, oh, well, doesn't count. And so it's like, I don't have to do this performance anymore. And it's just like science isn't a performance. All of these steps are well known. And on a personal level, it is genuine torture, because these derivations take 7 years. Yeah. And then it's just like, there's no big concepts left. And so it's profound abuse of my ability. It really is. Nobody cares. Nobody gives a shit. Thanks for watching. See you on the next one.